So Joe Rogan made some headlines yet again. Apparently these days, if he so much as farts, he makes headlines. It's funny because there are so many people who were in show business or are in show business or who are comedians who they want so desperately to get that like attention. Joe doesn't even want that attention, and he gets that attention. It's kind of hilarious how it all works out. Anyway, so he talked a little bit about Nancy Pelosi and her insider trading and how wealthy she's gotten while she's been in office and the sketchy things that are going on behind the scenes. Let's take a look and then I'll react.
That's done by members of Congress. The amount of fucking money that they make when they know decisions that are going to be signed and passed. They know laws that are going to be put into place. They know, like there was one recently that we were talking about Nancy Pelosi and the amount of money she invested in Tesla right before Biden signed this EV bill, electric vehicle bill. It's like 1.2 million. Find out if that's true. It was like
they should all have to put their money in trusts while they're in office that are done in fucking mutual funds, index funds, things that are auto-generated buying and not individual stocks.
Well, insider trading is against the law.
Yeah.
How is that not insider trading?
Right.
If you know that someone's going to sign a bill and that bill is going to be a massive boost to the electrical vehicle industry, just as an example, and you know that bill is going to be signed, so right before that bill's signed, you buy a fuckload of stock in electrical vehicles. And then the next day, or whenever it was, that bill gets passed, and then that stock goes up, and you make a shit ton of money. How is that not illegal?
So Nancy Pelosi's net worth, it varies depending on which source you look at, but it's about $115 million. She's been in Washington a long time, of course, but you know the official salary is what? About $200,000 or something like that. How'd you get that much money, dog? How'd you get that much money? So there's been a number of reports on this recently. I wanted to run through some of the facts with you guys so you understand this. Paul Pelosi, who is, of course, Nancy Pelosi's husband, what Joe's referring to there, he purchased Tesla stock on March 17th at a strike price of $500 per share for a total of approximately $2.18 million. Since Paul Pelosi's purchase, Tesla's share price increased nearly 19% to more than $1,036 per share, making his shares worth nearly $2.6 million. They say that's a net profit of $420,000 on that trade alone. Pelosi and her husband have profited at least $30 million on insider trades. Paul Pelosi has also been criticized for trading shares of the stock Alphabet, just as Congress was considering an antitrust bill in July 2021. And that move made him over $5 million. This is according to Fortune magazine. Now, so here's the way it works for those of you who don't understand the specifics of it. Because it gets a little complex and convoluted. People have a gut instinct that this is wrong. They might not understand the specifics around it. But turns out that the antitrust bill that was being debated was sort of toothless. And industry came to know that. And so as soon as Nancy Pelosi knew, look, we've defanged this thing. There is going to be no antitrust bill. That's when he invested in Alphabet, knowing that the stock would go up as soon as everybody realized, hey, that bill is toothless and they're safe. They're good. They're not going to break it up. There's not going to be anything tumultuous happening to them. So she has that insider knowledge beforehand, goes and tells Paul Pelosi, and he acts on it, and they get massively wealthy. And the grossest thing of it all is all we have right now is what's called the Stock Act, which is sort of like a transparency law, which is like, look, you're allowed to be corrupt, but you better tell us exactly how you're being corrupt and which stocks you're buying and when. And even with just the transparency law, these assholes still violate it all the time. Now, by the way, I don't want to give you the misimpression that it's just Pelosi or that it's just Democrats. It's all of them. So there was a report that came out recently. I think it was a Business Insider report. At least 182 high-ranking congressional staffers have violated a federal conflict of interest law. 59 members of Congress have violated a law designed to stop insider trading and prevent conflicts of interest. Nearly 75 federal lawmakers who held stocks in COVID-19 vaccine makers, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, or Pfizer in 2020, with many of them buying or selling these stocks in the early weeks of the pandemic. So I'm quoting directly from that piece, by the way. So as soon as they knew they had early information, hey, we got a vaccine and it's going to work out, they buy up the stock, knowing that the stock is going to go up. And I have so many examples of specifics here. GOP Senator Tommy Tuberville violated the Stock Act up to 132 times, totaling at least $894,000. Again, there's just one example. There was that very famous story, Kelly Loeffler, and was it Purdue, the other one? The two senators in Georgia. This was before Warnock won and Ossoff won. They were caught dead to rights with Dianne Feinstein, among many others. There was a meeting right before the stock market crash from COVID, where a bunch of these elite politicians got together. They were warned, hey, dog, this COVID thing is really serious. This is going to impact the market. It's going to plummet. You do with that information whatever you will. And so then they all turned around and sold like millions of dollars worth of stocks, acting on that insider knowledge. And one of the reasons why Ossoff won and Warnock won is because they were pointing out, on top of arguing for, I want to fight to give you guys $2,000 relief checks. On top of that, they were also out there saying, look at how corrupt they are. They were obviously doing insider trading, acting on this insider knowledge, personally profiting off of what they knew was about to happen. You didn't have that luxury. You didn't know what was going on. You might have been investing your money like a sucker. But they profited every turn left and right. I got more examples. Tom Price was the former head of Health and Human Services under Donald Trump. He's a former Republican representative as well. This is a guy who invested in, I think it was a medical device company, then was pushing for legislation that increased the price of the medical device company that he just invested in. It is nothing but a colossal cesspool of corruption and nepotism and every negative thing you can think of. That's what's going on. So I love that Rogan is talking about this. His audience, we've looked at the empirical data on his audience. His audience overall leans right. I'm happy that they're learning about this, and so they all might come to believe, if they don't already believe, like, why should these fuckers be allowed to trade that shit? And the reason why that's a good thing is, of course, typically the right-wing idea, the like pro-capitalist idea, is this notion of like, why would you restrict that? What's the problem? These are free adults. They can make whatever decisions they want. If they happen to profit off of it, good for them. Like, you could see right-wing arguments for the status quo, but Rogan's audience is going to know, especially because Rogan is echoing this himself, like, that's fucking stupid. They got a leg up over everybody. Like George Carlin said, it's a big club and you ain't in it. And the fact of the matter is, what are they doing there in Washington, D.C.? They're not actually representing their constituents. They're not representing the people. They're not looking at the polling data, figuring out what you want and delivering like a politician should in a constitutional Republican representative democracy. A lot of them are there for narcissism and self-aggrandizement and, personally, financially gaining. And even a guy who Rogan has had on his podcast a number of times, Dan Crenshaw, he had a very famous statement when this report came out exposing all the corruption going on in D.C., the personal corruption, where he said something along the lines of like, well, I'm not in favor of any more rules on this because how are we supposed to personally improve ourselves? You're there to do public service. You don't want to do public service, then get the fuck out. He makes it seem like, why can't I get fucking massively wealthy as I'm supposed to be representing the people? Well, pick a different field, Dippy. What are you talking about? And I haven't even breached the conversation about, honestly, what may be the more insidious form of corruption, which is just campaign finance contributions. Like, we've all come to accept that as like, yeah, that's just how the system works. It is what it is. But that actually might lead to even worse decisions than this shit. If you have politicians who are raising so much money from the military-industrial complex, and then, wow, would you look at that? They're voting in favor of the next war, and they're voting in favor of arming this dictatorship. It's like, gee, I wonder why. Could it be because Raytheon and Boeing and Halliburton just cut them a check for hundreds of thousands of dollars? Yeah, that might have something to do with it. Or getting all this money from Big Pharma, and then, oh, would you look at that? There's a consensus in Washington that we shouldn't lower the cost of prescription drugs, even though everybody virtue signals like, we're about to do it, we promise. So it says it all, man. It says it all. Rogan's 100% right on Pelosi. That entire report in Business Insider is damning. It's a bipartisan problem. There's actually slightly more Republicans who are violating the Stock Act than Democrats, but it's a cesspool, and it's disgusting. And they're corrupt. It needs to stop. And the thing is, this is one of those areas where there is a consensus among the public, but the only people who disagree are the people who are in the position to make the laws. And so it's like, this is something that would directly impact their own wallets, and so they're more hesitant to do it. Now, there has been some movement on certain bills. There was a John Ossoff bill, there was a Hawley bill, there was an Elizabeth Warren Pramila Jayapal bill to address this and sort of, ban the personal profiting off of stocks, but I don't know how far it got, and I don't know if it's ever going to actually pass. But look, it's a no-brainer. It needs to pass. If it doesn't pass, we can't pretend to be anything other than a kleptocracy and an oligarchy and a fucking banana republic.
Ever since Adpocalypse, when YouTube defunded all independent news and politics overnight, we haven't trusted them. We know they can pull the rug out from underneath us at any time. If you enjoy this content, please consider tipping $1 or $2 per month on the Secular Talk Patreon. Link in the video description box below. Thanks for your support.